Welcome to the mini episode of the Sweep Spot podcast. This is number 17, and again, I have another guest with me. I shouldn't say guest, Ken. Ken's with me.
Well, yeah, thank you for coming to terms with my agent. So, yes, here I am. Special guest star. That's what.
That's right.
You know, I'm going to be like Heather Locklear. Every episode I'm on, you're going to run a banner that says "Special Guest Star." You know.
Yeah, you haven't become a regular yet on the many episodes.
I'm a highly irregular. So
yeah.
Too much information.
Well, all that banter, I started doing these mini episodes as something to put in between to add things, just little things that I could add to the show. It's something that I could at least put out some content once a week. And I was doing it a lot by myself, and I will do some by myself in the future. But lately, I've been having a few little guests on, and Ken here. So
yeah. We haven't really had, you know, the structure of our main shows is, it's a little bit structured. I mean, we've got current events, and then we have a guest on often. We don't always have a guest on, but we frequently do. And there's not a lot of time for us to just kind of talk about more personal matters or more commentary, you know. Yeah.
No, that's true. Yeah, we don't. And then if you're the first time listener, you're like, who are these fools? No, no, we are both former Disneyland Custodio cast members, and we talk about Disneyland. So, on this episode, we thought it would be kind of fun to talk about the annual pass program for Disneyland and talk about our personal experiences with it, and maybe a little bit of history on the program itself, and maybe some speculation on the future of the program.
Yeah.
So we noticed that, well, we were talking about this before we even looked it up, but before annual passes, or even before the passport to get in, where you just pay the one fee to get in, and you could ride as many rides as you want.
Yeah, they called that the unlimited passport.
Unlimited passport. Yeah. Well, they had the ticket books, as most of you probably know. We've talked about it.
Officially known as coupons. We call them tickets, like e-ticket, but they were the official terminology was coupons, but everybody called them tickets.
Right. So they had that from the beginning, and they got away from that in 1982, I believe, and they started with. So what they did was, when they had the coupon books, you would. So if you don't know, you would be able to. Each one was worth. So certain attractions would be an NA ticket. So it would start with the smaller ones. It'd be like the carousel might be an A. And so on up.
Well, the streetcar. You know, the streetcar was an A. The horse-drawn trolley. You know, but e-tickets were the most expensive and thrilling, and you know,
like Space Mountain.
Yeah, and then and I think they sometimes I think they had included like some complimentary things, like go see the Lincoln Show for free or whatever.
Right.
You know.
And then there was the sponsored attractions where those were free, right?
The certain sponsored attractions were free because the sponsors wanted people to come in and basically see their advertisement.
Right.
You have to picture this. This goes back to the days when they didn't have, amusement venues often sprang up as a collection of competing businesses. You know, so everybody would pay for each thing separately. And when Disneyland, that's what people were used to when Disneyland was built. So admission was a relatively small fee. You know, like I think it started out like $1. I think is what it started out as.
Yeah, I think so.
To get in, but the $1 only got you in. It didn't get you necessarily on any attractions or whatever. You know, so but most people would buy the ticket books, which had included admission and a certain number of experiences.
And so when they got rid of the coupon books, some of those people that would come regularly would come. A lot of them, you know, you mentioned this earlier, at the Plaza Gardens, they'd had a stage there, and they had big band dancing. And it wasn't the only place. They also had the Tomorrowland Terrace area too. But a lot of people would go over there and dance on Friday or Saturday nights. And so they were able to come in for just a small fee and maybe eat something, which they're spending money, and maybe shop or something, and then go dancing till the end of the night.
Or maybe watch the parade, or
right.
Something like that. They weren't there for the whole day to go around riding as many attractions as they could. They were coming in often just for a few hours, just to hang out, sit on a bench, or go dancing, something like that.
And so that's when they got rid of the coupon books, that they realized there's still, what do they do for those people? Because those people aren't going to want to pay. I don't remember what it started at. I'm guessing $25, but
no, it was even less than that, if you can believe it.
Oh, the passports?
The unlimited passport for a day, I think for adults, was under $20, I believe.
Yeah. So
I mean, hard to believe now. It's hard to believe now, but that was early '80s, right?
Yeah.
So, but still, that was a lot of money to spend on a weekly basis
back then.
Yeah. So what they came up with? What was their solution, Lynn?
The annual pass program.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe the free. You said you had one in '85, I believe?
Yeah, my parents had set aside some. We were a family of 6, right? So that was quite expensive. And what they did, set aside some money for like a vacation or whatever. And then when they had money left over, and my parents were like, hey, let's buy some Disneyland annual passes, because we used to go like maybe twice a year or whatever. And they said, let's buy some Disneyland annual passes, and we can spend a year going like every week or every 2 weeks, and our kids will get sick of the place, and that'll be it. We probably won't ever go until maybe somebody from out of town wants to go, and we'll take them.
Yeah.
Now it's funny that my parents thought that's how it was going to work out, because we ended up renewing every year, and then I became a cast member. So in '85, an annual pass was $100 for an adult pass, and what that got you was admission to every day the park was open to general admission, not to private parties, and it got you free parking.
Wow.
That was it. Parking and admission, that was it. No discounts, no special parties, no special merchandise, nothing like that. That was, and it wasn't heavily advertised. It was just they might have had a slip of, they would hand out like the entertainment schedule at the parking entrance, and there might have been a mention of the annual passes in that piece of paper. But you would go off to the little side there of the entrance, and you would get your picture taken and get your annual pass. It was not heavily pushed. It was not heavily advertised. It was because it was intended for those people who were regular visitors, who were like, look, we're not coming in here to wait in line all day and crowd out your attractions. We just want to come in and dance and maybe have a meal, hang out, That's what it was intended for. And there was a season pass too. And the season pass, annual pass was a year from the date of purchase. Okay, season pass it basically excluded summer. So it was cheaper than the annual pass, and it basically excluded summer. So once like September hit, all the season pass holders could come back in. And that was it. Those were the 2 tiers. There was no bi-coastal pass, and that was like I said, no discounts, no special privileges of any sort. It was just that. It was a very simple program.
Yeah, I remember my first one was 87, 88. I can't remember the exact. I think I was a sophomore, so yeah, it would have been 87, 88. But
and you wanted to go to Videopolis, right?
Yeah, we went there. We liked Disneyland, but that was one of the things we did. And my friend John, he had a brother who was on attractions. He was a couple years older than us, and he worked Jungle Cruise and I think the Mark Twain, and he drove that in the Fantasmic and all that later on. But yeah, so his shift would be like, like you remember the shifts back then. His would be like 4 to 12:30 or something for attractions, and so we would just ride with him, at like 3 or something, and then we'd get in around 4, and we would just hang out until the park closed, and then we'd meet him out by his truck in the Castle River parking lot. So that was kind of convenient because then we had a way to. But sometimes we'd have one of our, and you probably were the same way. We'd have our parent, maybe one parent would drop us off, and then, another parent would come and pick us up or something like that.
Yeah,
fun,
yeah. There was. We would have. We were from South Pasadena, so we would have. That was quite a drive, especially on the 5 freeway Friday afternoons after school or whatever. I mean, once I got my license, it was pretty cool. Yeah. But before then, our visits were mostly weekends.
Same here.
But there were times on Fridays, like after school or whatever, or summer, and just come on down. Might be dropped off. There was one year, how old was I? I wasn't working at the park yet. I guess I must have been like 16 or whatever. It was New Year's Eve, and my parents decided to let me. They let me stay there. They went home, but they let me stay for New Year's Eve, and they got me a hotel room. I can't remember if it was the Alpine or the Heidi. It was one of those two.
Wow.
But they got me a hotel room, so after midnight I could go and sleep it off and and go back in the park the next day. And yeah, that was fun. I was just a I was like 16. So
wow. Wow.
Yeah, they trusted me because I wasn't exactly a party animal. So I know it's hard to believe. People who know me think I must have been some wild teenager, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, there was a time I think I was a junior. I think I ditched school, or we didn't have it, but it was on a weekday. But I rode my bike to Disneyland, and because I lived in Lakewood at the time, it's not like really close.
That's quite a distance.
Yeah, I think it's like 16 miles, but I ended up riding my bike.
You really are a biker. You really are a biker. Man, that's...
Yeah,
wow,
it was just a chintzy little 10-speed, but I rode my bike all the way up. First I went up South Street, and in that area it's called South Street, and then it turns into Orangethorpe, and then somewhere down the line, it might have been Beach Boulevard, I turned right and went up Beach, and then went left up Catella, and remember where the bike racks were by the main gate?
Yes.
Yeah.
there were. I mean, it's kind of funny to think there were bike racks there, but there were.
Yeah.
It was more of a neighborhood park back then. What you probably had was an in-service day.
Yeah, maybe.
Where the teachers had to go for training or whatever. But
yeah, that was it, Ken.
I'm covering for you, man. You want it's going to be on your permanent record.
Yeah.
You ditched.
But that was pretty liberating because I didn't have a car. I didn't get a car until I was 18, but so I didn't have a car or anything. So to do that on my own, and then when I went there, I didn't go on any rides. I just walked around and I sat down and I ate. And,
Yeah, we had we used to go when we were younger. Still in the 80s, and my younger siblings and we would bring the neighbor kids too, and we would go, because the neighbor kids got annual passes too, so they would go with us. And my parents would, drop us off at the park and, say, meet us back at the hub at this time, and we would go play hide and seek on the island or whatever, Thompson Island. Wow. But one of my neighbor friends was sitting there playing in the dirt on Thompson Island. And this woman's like, man, your parents paid all this money for you to come here and play in dirt. And of course we didn't bother telling them, we're annual pass holders. We're here like every week. So,
yeah. Wow.
But we used to it was word of, sorry, hold that thought.
Oh no, go ahead.
We were, it was word of mouth. Like when Splash Mountain first opened, that first summer we would wait in line over and over and over again to ride it, and while we're waiting, because it was like an hour and a half line, there was no fast pass back then. Fast pass hadn't been invented yet, and we're waiting in line, and we're talking about. I won't go there, but we're talking about. We're just hanging out, and people behind us would be just like, "Hey, so you come here a lot?" And we go, "Oh yeah," and we would end up like. They would go, by the time we got to the ride, they're like, "Hey, we're going to buy annual passes too."
Wow.
So we must have sold annual passes to people, and that's how it worked back then. It was word of mouth because they weren't pushing it. They weren't advertising it. And then what happened? They started advertising it, right? I mean,
well, that's probably, so, that whole experience you had up until 1990 because then you didn't need an annual pass, right?
Then I became a cast member, right?
Right, but so 1990. So for me though, I didn't have an annual pass. I don't think my senior year, and I didn't have one because then I worked at Plaza Inn in 91 to 93 off. I was like seasonal part time, whatever, and then So then I worked off and on, like busy weekends and stuff, and then summer and Christmas and all that, spring breaks. But I would, so I didn't need an annual pass. But then after my time ended at Plaza Inn, that's when I got an annual pass again. I think that was like 93, and I had one from 93 until I hired into Custodio in 98. And I actually bought an annual pass like pretty close to the time, like 2 months before I got hired into Custodio. So, because I didn't know at that time I was gonna.
You had no idea, yeah.
I just renewed it, so you didn't have yours again until 2005.
Until I quit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can tell. Yeah, until I was forced out in a hostile takeover. Yeah, no, but then they started treating it like a marketing segment. They started saying, "Hey, we're gonna." Well, the first thing they tried was like, "Oh, we're gonna give you special parking. We're gonna have special parking just for annual pass holders." But then I think they tried certain discounts, and they started creating more passes. Different tiers. There's blockout dates. Then they decided monthly payments. If they're going to allow monthly payments, because it used to be, you just paid it all up front. Well, $100 in 1985. $100 is not chump change, but it's not. It wasn't like.
It was like $200 or $300 now, right? Maybe $200.
Yeah, you count inflation. Yeah, So it's not. But they just started going crazy with it. Let's have all these different tiers. Let's have parties for them. They used to have parties for annual pass. That kind of got the brakes on it after the Light Magic incident.
Yeah.
1997.
So real quick for the people that don't know, what was that and what happened with that?
Okay, Main Street Electrical Parade was running since the 70s, and then in 1986 they said, farewell season electrical parade. Next year we're going to have Light Magic, this brand new, it's supposed to be like this, electrical parade, 2.0.
Right.
But it's going to be a street-tacular. It's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. Oh my gosh, it's going to be so nice. They start. It was a huge deal. But then they did the preview parties for annual pass holders, but the show was not ready yet. And of course, the show was not the Main Street Electrical Parade. Mm-hmm. So you had all these. The internet Disney community was just kind of in its infancy back then. And a bunch of them were just like, "Oh, this is terrible." They were really mad at Disneyland president back then, and they went and complained about it. And there was bad word of mouth about Light Magic, and I think that soured the company on doing special parties for annual pass holders for a while.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
But you still had discounts, you still had special merchandise.
Yeah. I remember having one in the 90s was nice because you didn't have the parking structure, right, and you could just drive in, park, and sometimes if you knew how to do it right, because they wouldn't be directing you where to park if you got there most of the time
late enough, yeah.
Right, as annual pass holder, most time I wouldn't be there during the day. I would show up maybe 5 o'clock. So
Yeah.
You get there at that time, they're not directing you, so you can kind of maneuver your way up towards the front if you could. And a lot of times I ended up over probably about where the tram load is now on the west side,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
so over that way. And then that's just a short walk. So we were kind of spoiled, I guess, because now, you have to park a ways away.
Well, what they would do back then, before they had special parking for annual pass holders.
Hmm.
What my parents would do is, we're just dropping the kids off, is what they would tell them, right?
Yeah.
So they would put a little slip of red paper. It was two-sided paper. Well, of course, all paper's two-sided, but it was red on one side, white on the other, right? So they would fold it so the red was showing, and then put it underneath the windshield wiper, and that's supposed to be, hey, this car's just dropping them off. So the parking personnel would direct us, rather than directing us to park with the rest of the cars, they would direct us towards the front of the parking lot to drop us off. But my parents would just go find an open spot, and then they would take the paper off the windshield.
Man.
One day they thought, well, I wonder what the white side means. So they got out of the car, folded it white, put it back underneath the windshield wiper. We got directed to handicap parking.
Oh no.
My parents were like thoroughly embarrassed. But then I guess enough pass holders were doing that they said, okay, why don't we give like special parking to annual pass holders?
Right.
That was but yeah. So
I was gonna say is that back then when our parents would drop us off, if in case for some people that maybe not familiar with the way Disneyland was back then, there was no Esplanade or California Adventure, and the drop off was literally just what do you think, 100 yards away or something? I mean, it was pretty close. Maybe not that close.
Yeah, it was really, really close. It was
very close, like about where the monorail beam was, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, fairly close.
So you would just, walk up to the entrance from there. It was great.
Yeah, it was fairly close, and
it was great to be for picking up too.
Exactly.
You'd go out there, and the person would drive up, and you would climb in, and off you went.
And they'd always exit off the was that West Street?
West Street, yeah, it was always West Street. Yeah.
Wow. We sound like a bunch of.
We're a bunch of old fogies.
Yeah. Remember back then?
Remember way back when. Yeah, it's really changed a lot since then.
So speaking, now we're moving. We spoke of the '90s, and a lot of it. Like you said, there was more perks and different things that happened, but I would say that it just got way out of control. What do you think? Like the 2010 or so, it seemed like the annual pass program at that point had just exploded.
Yeah, just the die was cast when they said monthly payments,
right,
without costing anymore. Mm-hmm. It was, that's the thing. It wasn't it wasn't like you were financing. It was you're paying the same amount. You just have all year to do it. Mm-hmm. So that's the option we took. I mean, why not? Why not make it monthly instead of lump sum?
Right.
And so yeah, it did. It got way out of hand. I mean, well, plus you had California Adventure open, and at first there was some question as to whether you were going to have to get a separate annual, like pay more for an extra annual pass or an add-on or whatever.
Yeah.
But then they realized, we'll just include it as, as part of the annual pass because we're not getting the kind of crowds that we thought we might.
Right.
And then they came up with the bi-coastal pass, because other theme park companies do that, of course. Mm-hmm. You can get a pass for like Cedar Fair that gets you into Cedar Point and Knott's Berry Farm and all that sort of thing. Yeah, same thing with Six Flags and whatnot. But so it became this huge thing and really widely known. And there were news stories about annual passes, and the secret was no longer secret.
Yeah. It got to the point where no one ever knows the numbers except for Disney, but it got to the point where this number went around a lot, saying, "Oh, there's 1 million pass holders." So yeah. I believe it, but I don't know. No one knows for sure.
Or that, something I heard recently was that half the attendance was annual pass holders.
And I believe it because I guess, Well, not to mention, I was going to say also that up to the closure of the park last year, uh, I had friends that live here in Utah that had annual passes, so it just made sense because if you go a couple times a year, even 3 or 4 times a year, it makes sense to do that because then
Yeah, I mean, I knew people who would do that with Walt Disney World. They would get an
Mhm.
annual pass. They would only go once a year, but see what they would do is they would move their trip up a week, so their second trip. So they would
I
get
see.
they get two trips out of one pass, and then they would go like a year without one or whatever. And
Makes
then the
sense. You get
next
the discounts and yeah.
yeah, because exactly. You get the discounts. You get an entrance to everything, and I mean, I'll tell you, it was great when I was a cast member.
Yeah.
Those perks were nice, to entrance and discounts and all that sort of thing. But um, yeah, you have people from Utah that have passes. I mean, that's
Arizona, yeah.
now imagine being a guest. You're maybe going to visit once in your lifetime. You know, you've traveled from maybe out of the country or whatever, and you're there, and like the place is just overcrowded, completely overcrowded. But half the people there are people who are there, who could come back, in a week. And it's like, why are these people crowding this place?
Just lounging around.
Everything's so crowded, and I just want to be able. They're taking up all the best spots for everything, all the shows. I don't stand a chance. How do I even, enjoy this place if it's so crowded and I can't get, I'm always going to be at the side of the audience area. I mean, so Disney has to balance that between,
Yeah.
I'm sure Disney has crunched the numbers and tracks everything. How much are people spending per pass? Because per visit, of course, the international guest is going to spend the most, typically. The out-of-state guest is going to spend a little bit less, and then finally the local guest is going to spend less still. So the annual pass holders are probably not spending a lot of. I mean, there's some that I got to get a corn dog or whatever. Now, people like me, I would try to avoid eating in the parks once I had my kids and everything because I just want, it's too expensive. So Disney, as I'm sure they say, well, the typical annual pass holder at this tier is spending this amount of money over the course of the year, which is much more than the once in a year guest, but you have to weigh that against, the crowding. If the international guest is not going to get on more than 2 rides because it's just, they don't realize they have to get there at 6 a.m. to start getting boarding passes for everything. I mean, yeah.
I was gonna say when I was a guest member, I had a guest asking me. I was in the Esplanade, and they were asking me about ticket because they said they noticed there's a 5-day ticket, and they wanted to go in for a whole week because they said this is their once in a lifetime, from like Australia or something. There's like their once in a lifetime trip, but they wanted to go for a whole week, and I was like, wow. I said, well, if you got an annual pass, because they were just going to do a 5-day and then a 2-day, and then I said, if you get an annual pass, I said, then you get the perks, the discounts, and then you have a little souvenir, your picture on a thing, So they're like, oh, that's a good idea. That's actually, cheaper. So they ended up.
Good guest service there, Len.
Thank you. So yeah, and at the time, I think it was like 139 or something. So
yeah,
it made sense to do that because it would be either end up being the same or somewhere around the same, a little bit less. So anyways. So then it seemed like you're talking about it just got, it's good. I'm not bashing the people there in passes like you were saying that they were kind of crowding the parks. It's just the way it happened, but it got to the point where it was a lot of annual passes, and I think the company likes, as a company, trying to make money. They like the annual pass holders because that's money that they can count on. Like, You know what I mean by that?
Yeah, it's a steady flow of money.
Steady flow. Right, I couldn't think of it. Yeah, so they like that because they can almost guarantee how much money they're going to make back per month with before it even happens because of that. So any company would like that, I think.
And how many annual pass holders would bring other people who weren't pass holders?
Right, people from out of town or whatever.
Exactly, and say, okay, well, I know the best ticket deals. Let's get you a ticket. And didn't some of them have discounts for buying tickets?
I think it was a little discount, yeah.
And I know there might have been special promotions now and then for that. And so it was like, if you've turned these people into salespeople for your park, that's another perk, because if the annual pass holder goes back to the office and says, "Oh my gosh, you should see the new show. You should go next weekend and see this show."
Yeah. Right.
So there's some benefits to it, but I mean, what happened though with this, with the closure?
Yeah. So then the closure happened, and then they had to start thinking about what happens when we reopen. Because now it's been closed for a year.
Yeah.
Or at this point, it'll be a year. I think they were talking about it before it was actually a year. But they thought, well, we're going to be closed for so long. When we do reopen, we're going to have all these annual pass holders that want to get back in the park because they have their passes still. And we told them that we would retro that time back to them.
Yeah.
So they had a big problem because that would be hard to please all these annual pass holders. It's a little different in Florida. There was not as many annual pass holders, but in California there is. And so how would you treat these? So their solution was to just cut the program, pay them their money back for whatever it was left on their passes from March 2020 on, and then just I think reboot the program. I think is what they're doing. And they've hinted at that already, that there will be some sort of, they're not going to call it an annual pass. I think they want to get away from that wording, but some sort of program for those people that want to come more often.
Frequent visitor or something like, Yeah. Well, we've talked about it before, I think, where they might... It might end up being kind of like a timeshare sort of thing, points. You basically, if you're buying your attendance, you're prepaying for your attendance in bulk, and the more of it you buy, the cheaper each day becomes, and you just kind of buy it in bulk, and then if you need to buy more of it later, you can, but. It's like, okay, I think for the next 6 months, I might want to go, 12 times. So I need to pay this amount, and you're buying at a cheaper rate than if you were buying individual tickets each time,
And we don't know that. We're just speculating.
It's a speculation, right?
We have no inside info, but I think that you're right on that. I also had heard different things about for people that maybe only want to go 8 times a year, because and that would be someone like myself, or people in Utah, Arizona, maybe even Oregon or Washington, but surrounding states that maybe go a little bit more often than maybe your average vacationer guest. So I think they're gonna come up with something, and it may end up being 6 different types of passes for different types of people. With different prices, obviously. Who knows? And I think it will be, no matter what it is, I think it will be a reservation type system from now on. Maybe
and
not.
I think there's going to be reservations most of the time for it, and I do think there might be the possibility of how they have 3 different prices for a day. You want to go buy a day.
Yeah, the different
pass,
tiers.
Yeah, the different tiers depending on how busy the day is going to be. I think, you're going to see that, but you're also going to see, I think, let's say the day's turning out to be a lot slower than they anticipated. I can totally see them sending out
a text or something.
A text, to, hey, if you come today, it won't cost as many points as you thought it, as originally, instead
It
of
won't go
this number of
against you
points.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be fewer points than otherwise would have been, what we had planned, so that you can get more people in there, more people buying dinner or whatever,
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they'll do something to that effect.
They'll definitely want to use technology to their advantage.
For sure.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see what they come up with. I may take advantage of something if it fits in, with my schedule and how many times we go. But yeah, we don't know. They did say that it's going to be sooner than later, but who's to know with everything going on? I don't think they're going to do it anytime this year, but I could see it happening sometime next year. That's just I don't know. They could do it this year. But
maybe. I mean,
I'm thinking probably sometime next year, maybe, during the slow time, maybe starting in January or February. But because I think that at this rate, the way that it's going now with the reservation ahead of time, 60 days and all that, when it gets to be January and February, you really will have a slow season again, like we used to have. So they're going to want to try to fix that, I think. So we don't know. We'll find out. And we always report on the latest stuff that you hear. Ken always brings that to us on our show. So we'll know as soon as it happens.
Yeah, every 2 weeks we have our regular full episode with current events, and we review the official word on what's happening.
That's right.
So, speculation's one thing, but what's actually announced is quite another.
Yeah, and so this week's going to be interesting. I'm actually, I'm not going to be there on April 30th, but I'm actually excited to see everyone's videos and hear about it and see it, too, through video.
We are recording our next episode
that night, right?
On the 30th, so
yeah.
So there's a little inside baseball for those of you listening that want to know how the sausage is made, or for you vegetarians, how the tofu is made.
Yeah.
So we will be recording. So we'll have, I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of breaking news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun. I'm really happy for the people that are going to get to go, and I'm happy for the cast members that are going to get to finally work and have guests there. And I think it just is a sigh of relief knowing that the park is doing what it was made to do again.
I'm happy most of all for people like, kids who want to go for their birthday, and they will will be able to go.
Yeah.
That's great. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Or graduation presents or whatever.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this little mini episode. Turned out to be a little more than a mini episode, but it's okay. We had a good time.
It's still relatively small, but
yeah, it is smaller. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for listening, and just spread the word. Tell people that we're here. They can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, and wherever fine podcasts are found.
That's right. Leave us a review on wherever you listen to us. We'd appreciate it. And check out our website, thesweetslot.com. We have all our information there. We have our books on sale there. We have both back in stock, so check that out. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.